Alright, Hipper, I know we have our differences, but it's your time, so let's get to work on things here and get started. No, I already knew I had stuff from HQ. However, actually looks like this one just came in. Let's see what this attachment is. Alright, I'm gonna be honest, it's gonna be hard not to make that joke. I mean, we weren't even an hour into my Scarezo livestream without one of you making a flat joke directed at Hipper already. To be honest, I could probably already imagine where the comments are gonna be for this one as well. However, today's video we will be focusing on the Kriegsmarine heavy cruiser, Admiral Hipper. With how many heavy cruisers that are in the game, will she be able to make herself known? Or will she fall flat? Short of the mark. Now, normally I'd compare against a sister ship, but Prinz Eugen is definitely an exception to the heavy cruiser grouping. I've already done a video on her already, so feel free to check that out if you haven't yet. Anyway, I don't believe it would be correct to compare the two to each other, since Prinz Eugen has plenty of differences from Hipper. And no, I wasn't talking about that difference originally. So what I'm going to do is compare her against the Deutschland class. These two are regarded as the best non-PR cruisers the Ironblood have to offer, and they are of the same rarity, so I think that's a pretty good pick. Nonetheless, let's dive in. Starting off like usual with survival stats, Hipper has a health pool of around 4.5k, which is a considerable difference from both Deutschland and Spee. So she could take a bit more of a beating than either of them, but not to the same degree as Prinz. All of them have medium armor, which makes them more vulnerable to AP guns from heavy cruisers and battleships. Yes, Warcorgi, that means you. Hipper also beats Spee and Deutschland in evasion, so she may be able to dodge a bit better, but unfortunately the differences aren't major enough for it to be noticeable. She also beats both of them in anti-air, and thus will do better overall against plane attacks. Do keep in mind though that Hipper is in the Ironblood faction, and as of such, won't really have a very high anti-air stat overall. Of course, there are plenty of characters to help with air control if that's very much needed. Yes, I'm talking you too. While she seems noticeably tankier than the Deutschland class, she loses in offensive strength. Hipper's firepower is well below both of them, so there will be a noticeable difference in damage dealt. Her torpedo stat is also lower, so there really is no way for her to out-DPS either of them, save for maybe if she's running better equipment. She barely beats them in reload, so her overall fire rate won't be too much of a game changer for it as well. So stat-wise, she really won't be able to beat them in overall damage. However, her equipment efficiencies could make a difference, so let's see if she's stacked. I'm sorry! Her main gun efficiency sits at 130%, which does lose to both of them. However, this efficiency does sit at around the average for heavy cruisers, so she could do decently when compared to other cruisers outside of the ones we're talking about here. Hipper does beat the Deutschland class in torpedo efficiency, and it's a decent enough difference that she could potentially out-DPS them in the torpedo area only. However, Ironbloods really aren't the ones you should be working with if you're wanting some pretty crazy torpedo damage. Lastly, her anti-air gun efficiency ties at 100%. This does feel like about the average for most cruisers, save for those in the Eagle Union. So there won't be any major anti-air game from really any of the Ironblood characters here. Her overall stat line doesn't really seem to put her at being better than the Deutschland sisters in terms of damage. She's tankier for sure, but the differences in their damage output may put her at more of a disadvantage. Now, when we do look at her stats at level 120, we do see she gets some considerable jumps to her stat line. Her health does get a pretty good bump alongside her evasion. Now, granted, evasion generally does get better as heavy cruisers get into the higher levels, so keep that in mind. And as well as the jump in firepower and torpedo is also very much appreciated and will help her get more damage in as well, but still nowhere near the Deutschland class girls. The small increase to anti-air it'll help, but it's still not a good stat if you're in plane heavy environments. Overall, Hipper is in an interesting place for an Ironblood heavy cruiser. My first experiences with the Ironblood cruisers were really through the Deutschland class and Prinz Eugen, which led me to look at them as kind of like a spectrum. On one end, you've got Prinz Eugen, who went for a more survival-focused role, and the other end has the Deutschland class that went all out on damage output over survival. Hipper seems to be kind of right smack dab in the middle of this spectrum. Of course, we'll need to see her skills to see if she stays in the middle or not, or if she ends up leaning one way or the other. Oh, and for those of you asking where I'd put Rune on this spectrum, well, yes. Anyway, let's check out her skills. Hipper's first skill is Guarding Shield, which spawns 2 rotating shields around her that last up to 15 seconds. Now, this skill does proc every 30 seconds, and it is a guaranteed proc, so take that as a pretty good thing for that. Now, one of the things that I do want to point out about shield skills is they really aren't that good as they sound. While it does say that it can block 10 shells, I've really only noticed that they seem to block auxiliary gunfire. Main gunfire, airstrikes, torpedoes, all of that will still hit Hipper, so the effectiveness of the shield isn't really as good as it sounds. Nonetheless, it is still a form of damage reduction, so it will reduce a small amount of damage that Hipper and even some of the other Vanguard members will take in a fight. Just remember that it may not amount to much at all. Now, her second skill is Vice Defense, which has up to an 8% chance to proc when she is attacked. If she does proc it, she will decrease the damage she takes by 50%. This damage reduction is pretty massive and can allow for her to take a pretty nasty hit from a battleship AP shot if it procs. Then again, if is a major thing to note here. 8% isn't a considerable chance to work with, so it's better to assume that this won't proc and just enjoy it when it does. Nonetheless, this skill can make a difference in combat. It's just not likely to. And besides, I'd rather save the RNG for other things. Now, the skills are both survival focused, so while I said she may be in the middle of the spectrum that I mentioned earlier, she is actually starting to lean more towards her sister in terms of the survival side of things. Overall, she does kind of work as a happy medium if you're looking for an Ironblood cruiser to have a decent damage output while not sacrificing survivability for it. Her skills won't help out too much, but they can still have a bit of an impact in a fight. Now, the bigger question is, does this mean that she is a mob or a boss fleet Vanguard member? While I would like to think that she could be in both, she probably feels way more at home in a mob fleet. Her stat line doesn't particularly impress against other cruisers in terms of damage, but her survivability could be enough to help her get through some rough fights without sacrificing damage output from her. As I will always say, when it comes to a boss, it's better to out-DPS it than it is to out-take it. If damage isn't a concern, since your ships are easily able to account for it, then honestly I would say take her sister for survivability. This is kind of unfortunately where she sits at. Don't get me wrong, she's not a terrible cruiser to use, but there are definitely better options than her to work with. Her overall damage output won't reach the same level as other heavy cruisers, and she loses to her sister in terms of survivability. She is, as I said earlier, a happy medium to work with that can do decent damage without sacrificing her ability to survive. Her skills aren't the strongest defensive skills, but can make a difference when they proc. So while there's definitely better options on both sides of that spectrum, she's still not a bad cruiser to work with, as she's kinda well-rounded. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Wait, where did you get that frying pan? Anyway, that'll be all for Admiral Hipper. Hope you enjoyed and that this will help you in your future endeavors. So the next video is set to be the Monitor Sisters Erebus and Terror, followed by my next random pick, who I've decided to make Shinano, since I have her pretty much ready to roll. Now, I do have a running list of characters to work with though, so feel free to check that out in the description below. If you see a ship girl that I have not covered yet on the list, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys again real soon. Where's Hipper?